Wow. I was trying to handle the lighting, and now it looks like I'm being interrogated. Like, that's the kind of lighting that I'm having. Oh, jeez. Hey, folks. My name is Jen. It is currently the 1st of January 2023 when I am filming right now, so I figured it is probably a good time to do my 2022 reading wrap-up. If the sound quality is off today, I do apologize. I am sick again. But in the interest of continuing to make sweet, sweet content for you all, this is just what we're working with right now. Yeah. So 2023 was overall for me, I think, a fairly good reading year. I read, over the course of the year, 100 books. My original goal was, I think I set my original goal at like 52 books, and then I upped it to like 75 at some point in the year. And then, yeah, I hit that goal like a couple of months ago, I want to say. So, yeah, 100 books, not too bad. It's slightly less than what I've read the past couple of years, but I did go through a couple of mild reading slumps, or stages where I ended up DNFing like a bunch of books, or I just couldn't get into everything. So that's how that kind of shook out. So let's get into, first of all, the stats for the year, I guess. So I'm working off of my own personal stats that I keep track of, and then also Goodreads stats. So looking at my year in books from Goodreads, let's see, 100 books read, 24,920 pages read. The shortest book I read was 20 pages long, and it was The Physical Manifestation of Washing My Hands Gets Me Off by Chuck Tingle. And the longest book I read was 1,276 pages, and that was, of course, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. The average length of books that I read this past year was about 249 pages. The most popular book that I read, I finished reading the Scots edition of the first Harry Potter book, and the least popular book I read was Successful Calamity by Edmund Fuller, which is this like non-fiction book from like I think, if I remember correctly, it took place in the 40s in Vermont. So my average rating for books in 2022 was 4.2 stars. The highest rated book I read was The Book of Cymbeline by Emma Stewart. And yeah, I just have a big, long bunch of books that we're going to get into in a second. So, all of the math that I've done here, I'm potentially incorrect, as math is not a subject that I'm really good at. So, if you take the time to do the math and are like, hey, you counted this wrong, sorry. But basically, from how I've done my math over the year, I read about 84 physical books, about 5 ebooks, and about 10 audiobooks. I feel like I have done the math wrong. My brain's not with it, guys. I don't even know anymore. As far as like star ratings go, I think overall this year I had fairly high like star ratings. Fairly like steady high star ratings. I had, first of all, for books that are unrated, and as a reminder, I began marking books as unrated in, I think it was like the bottom half of 2020, and that was because sometimes I will come across books that it's just like, how am I supposed to rate this? If it's like a memoir or an autobiography, it's like, it just feels a little weird to rate someone's writing of their own personal experience, so I decided to stop rating memoirs and audiobooks. Audiobooks. Autobiographies, excuse me. And also I ran into a few books this year where I understand what their genre is, but I couldn't figure out how to rate them. Just because it was the Chuck Tingle books that I read this year, pretty much. I don't know how to rate them. I know technically they are erotica, but I personally found nothing erotic about them, but at the same time, I don't, even though they're listed as erotica, I don't fully think that they are meant to be titillating in that particular way. I think they're meant to be just pure entertainment and mostly kind of hilarious. So yeah, it's like really hard to rate those because I didn't know how to rate them as comedy, entertainment, as erotica. I wasn't really sure, so I just ended up not rating them instead. And if I read any more of his works in the future, they're probably also going to be unrated because I don't know how to do it for them because it's weird where to place it really. So yeah, so basically I had 5 unrated books this year. I had 0 1-star reads, 0 2-star reads, 13 3-star reads. I had 48 4-star reads, and about 35 5-star reads. So moving into genres, normally I keep a terribly drawn bar graph to keep track of everything, but this year when I was going over data and stuff like that, I was just trying to figure out how's an easier way so you guys can physically see what I'm talking about when I'm like talking about it. And then I managed to find a like pie chart thing. Oh man, I forget what the free site is called, but I'll like mention it in the description box down below when I look at it, but when I'm like editing and stuff. But yeah, I basically made my pie charts on there, so I can throw up for you right now while I'm talking, editing Jen of the future, and you can see what I'm talking about for this year. So as you can see on like the chart, so this year I read 2 adventure, 11 classics, 12 fantasy, 0 historical fiction, 3 horror, 6 literary fiction / contemporary, 6 manga, 11 graphic novels, 26 mysteries, so that was the genre that I read the most this year, 7 nonfiction books, 2 picture books, 3 poetry, 6 romances, 0 sci-fi, 2 plays, and 5 erotica. And hopefully I will be able to figure out how to show you. I actually typed in my stats on genre reading for the past like 4 years pretty much, so hopefully I'll be able to figure out how to put all of them up at the same time so you can see them. But you can see there's a real difference here between 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. A real change and shift in like genres that I've read like the most of, and things like that. So I thought that was pretty cool to see what differences there has been over the past couple of years. Yeah, that was pretty cool. So now that that is all of those things, I can get into basically what I read per month, so into the actual books. So to my usual go through each monthly reads. Some of these books I will not be physically holding up because they were books that I borrowed from people and I have given them back. B, they are audiobooks or ebooks and I don't own copies of the books. C, they are books that I unhauled. Or I have one of these books that I thought I still held on to, but I cannot find it. So yeah. So, first off, way back in the month of January 2022, I read 7 books, and those were as follows. Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. Beauty and the Beast by Barbara Hambly. All 4 volumes of Forbidden Dance, and this is by Hanako Ashihara. The Street Lawyer by John Grisham. And Successful Calamity by Edmund Fuller. Then in February, I read 4 books. Those were Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz by L. Frank Baum. I'm very slowly making my way through this collection still. Then comes Marriage by Casey Michaels. The Rivals by Richard Sheridan. And An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. And the books that I read in February, at least one of them was for Feb Regency. In March, I read 2 books, and those were The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas and The Clocks by Agatha Christie. In April, I read 11 books, and those were Digging Up Love by Chandra Bloomberg, The Thinking Machine by Jacques Futrelle, The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie, How to Find a Princess by Alyssa Cole, Pride and Prejudice the manga. This adaptation is by Stacey King and the art is by Posey. Crooked House by Agatha Christie, 4 Centuries of Great Love Poems by various poets, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, Gallant by V.E. Schwab, Beltane by Llewellyn Sabat Essentials, and The Wedding Dilemma by Mariah Engelman. And then in the month of May, I read 5 books. Those were The Secret of the Golden Pavilion and The Mystery of the Fire Dragon, both by Carolyn Keene, The Foundling by Lloyd Alexander, The Runaway Jury by John Grisham, and Elephants Can Remember by Agatha Christie. In June, I read 11 books. They were Turn Gay by the Existential Dread that I may actually be a character in a Chuck Tingle book. My handsome sentient face mask protects me despite the ridiculous conspiracy theories that he won't. Also, he pounds my butt. Bisexual vampire unicorns teach me the importance of the vampire cough. Not pounded by anything while I practice responsible social distancing. And the physical manifestation of washing my hands gets me off. And those, of course, are all by Chuck Tingle. A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Daughter of the Deep by Rick Riordan. 8 Minutes from the Sun by Colette Inez. The Man in the Brown Suit by Agatha Christie. And Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. Then in the month of July, I read 12 books. And those were The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. Matilda. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, all by Roald Dahl. The Illyrian Adventure by Lloyd Alexander. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. The Early Cases of Hercule Poirot by Agatha Christie. The Count of Monte Cristo, the manga. Adaptation is by Crystal S. Chan, and the art is by Nachman Poon. The Wrong Box by Robert Louis Stevenson and Lloyd Osbourne. Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. And Lunasa by Llewellyn Sabat Essentials. Oh, I almost forgot. In June, I DNF'd 2 books, and those were To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf and The Human Abstract by Elizabeth Willis. And in July, I DNF'd like 6 books. Those were Hidden by Fern Michaels, Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly, The Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, The Maid by Nita Prose, I Will Survive, and also The Dating Diaries, both by Kirsten Kemp. In August, I read 7 books. The Year of Secret Assignments by Jacqueline Moriarty, With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, The Poisoner's Handbook by Deborah Bloom, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, Empty Smiles by Catherine Arden, My Own Worst Enemy by Carol Sonnenklar, and Amulet Volume 1, The Stonekeeper by Kazuki Buishi. Also in August, I DNF'd 4 books. Those were The Long Fall by Walter Mosley, Dead Dead Girls by Nikisa Afia, Kiss Me Kill Me by Lauren Henderson, and Seducing Mr. Darcy by Gwen Crady. In September, I read 13 books. Those were as follows: How Right You Are, Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, My Side of the Mountain by Jean Craighead George, Wicked Vermont by Thea Lewis, Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks, Amulet, volumes 2 through 8, The Stonekeeper's Curse, The Cloud Searchers, The Last Council, Prince of the Elves, Escape from Lucian, Firelight, and Supernova, and these are all by Kazuki Buishi. The Dark Horse by Craig Johnson, and The Field Guide to Dumb Birds of North America by Matt Cracked. Okay, then in October I read 11 books, and a good chunk of those were for the Bougie Readathon. The books I read were as follows: After the Funeral by Agatha Christie, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, The Shining by Stephen King, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, Ghostly Tales and Eerie Poems of Edgar Allan Poe, Witch Witch by Eva Ibbotson, Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, The Book of Cymbeline, written and illustrated by Emma Stewart, Mandy by Julie Andrews Edwards, and The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. In November, I read 7 books. Those were 450 from Paddington by Agatha Christie, The Honjin Murders by Seishi Yokomizo, A Man Lay Dead by Niall Marsh, The Ghosts of Rose Hill by R.M. Romero, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the Scots edition, and The Adventure Zone, Here There Be Gerblins, and Murder on the Rockport Limited, and these are both by Clint, Justin, Travis, and Griffin McElroy, and the art is by Carrie Peisch. And in December, I read 10 books, or 11 books, depending how you want to look at it. I read one of them twice. Death in a White Tie by Niall Marsh, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the movie novelization, and this one is by, oh my goodness, Louise Gickow. Midwinter Murder by Agatha Christie, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which this is the one that I read twice, audiobook and physical book. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the original, like, by Dr. Seuss. The 13 Problems by Agatha Christie. The House of the Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson. A Caribbean Mystery by Agatha Christie. Christmas Stories by Charles Dickens. And Funny Stories selected by Michael Rosen. And that is it, folks. That is everything that I read in 2022. Really random amount of books, really. Some of these books were quite random reads. I had a hard time sticking with actual TBRs this year. Like, oftentimes, my TBRs do become just kind of like guidelines often, because I'm very much like a mood reader. So I have tried to cultivate my TBRs monthly into what I think I'm going to be into at the time. For example, I can read mysteries pretty much any time of the year, but in the springtime is when I tend to go for, oftentimes, poetry, romance novels, and classics. During the summer, depending on the class, if it gets swashbuckling like Treasure Island was, that's what I want to read. That's when I want to read a lot of like adventure, nonfiction. During the winter is when I tend to lean towards like fantasy, oftentimes horror for like the fall. You know, so I'm very much, I read genres by like mood, so I always try to like pick, for my monthly TBRs, like books that I think are going to fit whatever mood I'm going to be in that month, like the seasons, the weather, what's going on, like that kind of thing. And sometimes I stick to it and sometimes I deviate, but they're still like books that are kind of within what I'd probably grab. This year it was just a little more difficult. I don't know what was with me exactly, but I had just a really hard time sticking with books that I set for my TBR. Instead, I just kind of went off into different places sometimes with my reading. But still, it was a pretty good selection of books that I read over the year anyway. Stay tuned pretty soon for my best reads and worst reads of the year. I'm hoping I can actually make those into one video this year instead of separating it, but knowing how I ramble, I have a feeling that they are still going to end up being like separate videos, but I will try my best. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me this past year. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you are new here, please subscribe if you would like. And yeah, Happy New Year, guys. I will see you all in the next video pretty soon, and I hope you are having a great start to your year and your reading year. Bye.